Got everything you need? Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Can you hear me fine? Is mic working? Working. Oh, gotta get a little closer. Or talk a little louder. Thank you for being here. My name is James Weir. I'm the Vice President and Field Trips Chair of the Washtenaw Bird and Nature Alliance. Great to see some new faces as well as some old friends. Just a couple things to mention before I hand things off to our main event tonight. We have lots of walks coming up the next 6-8 weeks during migration. Every Monday night at 6 p.m. for the next 6 weeks, we are at Math Botanical Gardens. Thursday mornings at 8 a.m. at the Arb, 9 a.m. on Friday mornings at the Arb. That's a beginner's bird walk. Anyone is welcome, but it's just sort of specifically geared for people who are just getting into it. And again, that's Friday morning. This coming Saturday, we have a BIPOC walk at Furstenberg Park here in Ann Arbor, near Huron High School. And there'll be lots of other events, some of which are already posted, some of which will be posted in the coming week or two as we figure out the rest of our plan for the spring. Yes, Juliet? Yes, on May 9th, the count in Washtenaw County. It's been going back how many years? Since the 5th? 30 years. Yeah, a couple of decades. And Juliet, past president of WBNA here and Ann Arbor City ornithologist, is coordinating it. It's a really fun day. We have segment leaders around different parts of Ann Arbor who then sort of divvy up territory. And then volunteers go out and spend the day counting birds to get an understanding of the migratory patterns over time. It's part of a large nationwide citizen science initiative. And it's a lot of fun. I've done it the last couple of years. I know a number of people here have as well. So if you're interested, you can find that information on our website or talk to Juliet or me after the event. The last thing, later today, we're going to be posting a field trip to Leelanau County and Machinski County in the third week of May. It's a fundraiser we're doing with a suggested donation of $100. And we'll spend 2.5 days up there birding, looking at blooming ephemeral wildflowers at a really beautiful nature preserve. And it should be a lot of fun. So that'll be up later tonight or tomorrow if you want to check that out. So that's it. Thanks again for being here. Thanks to our members. If you aren't a member, please consider it. Help support everything that we do. And like, for example, bringing Chad Machinski here tonight to talk about Chimney Swift. Chad is a botanist first and then fell in love with the birds through that. Works for the Michigan Audubon Society here, managing all 20 of their sanctuaries and properties in the state. And with that, I will pass things off to Chad, and thank you for being here. All right, here we go. Thank you all for coming. My name is Chad Machinski. Just going to repeat a little bit because I got a whole little spiel to do here. Chad Machinski, Conservation Manager with Michigan Audubon. Going to talk about chimney swifts, but first, I'm going to touch a little bit on Michigan Audubon. So our mission is connecting birds and people for the benefit of both through conservation, education, and research efforts in the state of Michigan. As James said, I manage 20 of the Michigan Audubon sanctuaries around the state, all the way up from the Keweenaw Peninsula to just west of here in Grass Lake at the Haney Sanctuary. In addition, I take care of our 2 bird-specific programs, Purple Martin Conservation, and what I'm here today to talk about, Chimney Swift. So let's get right into it. All right, behold, the Chimney Swift, commonly called the cigar with wings, because it is very cigar-shaped, and we'll see some videos of them in flight, and you'll definitely get that. They are a very small bird, 4.5 to 6 inches, with a 10.5 to 12-inch wingspan. So small bird. The color, brown with tan throat, a little gray as well. And they're also very light. They weigh less than an ounce,
which is about the same weight as a slice of whole wheat bread. So next time you're making a sandwich, just have that piece of bread in your hand and just imagine it's a swift instead, and it's right there. All right, chimney swifts are in the family of Apodidae, which roughly translates from Latin to no feet. This is a bit of a misnomer. Of course, chimney swifts do have feet, but they're small, and we'll see in the next slide what they do with their feet. It's a little different than most birds. In addition, although these birds resemble swallows and purple martins, they are not closely related to those birds at all. They're more closely related to nightjars, which is most of the birds on the left half, and also hummingbirds, actually very closely related to hummingbirds, which most people would not suspect. So, as we just said, Apodidae roughly means no feet, but they do have feet, and they are able to perch on vertical surfaces like that. That is their resting position. They're perfectly content in that position, and in fact cannot really perch any other way like normal birds. They have feet that are referred to as pamprodactyl, which means the 4 toes are arranged in the front of the foot, with one of the toes actually kind of being quite flexible, able to move to the back. Or the trade-off to all this is that they cannot sit on a branch like your chickadee, like your cardinal. You're never going to find them like that. If you do find them like that, they're probably in trouble. Okay, so they want to be, if they're going to be perched, they're going to be perched on vertical surfaces. A couple other key features here. Chimney swifts have bristle-tipped tail feathers. You might ask why. I'm going to tell you right now. It's because these little bristle tips actually help them. Think of this image here. This bird is hanging on to a vertical surface. These little bristle tips actually create a bit of friction. They help grab onto that vertical surface. All right. Now these are all great features, the feet and the tail feathers, but odds are you're not going to get anywhere near one of these birds to see these features. They're not really that helpful in identifying this bird, right? And we're going to take a look at their calls and their flights. Now, the reason I said that about this species bird is because they are among the most aerial of all birds. They fly about 1.35 million miles in a given year. And you might be thinking, like, okay, well, they probably migrate, and that's probably where they're racking up a lot of that mileage. And that's true. However, these birds are doing everything in flight. They do it all on the wing. They're eating on the wing. They are taking baths on the wing. They're drinking on the wing. They're only going to be landing to roost in the evenings, which we'll talk about, and to build their nest and tend to their young. So it's really important that for identification purposes, you get comfortable with their call and how they look in flight. So we'll listen to their call here. It's characterized as kind of this high chittering. And there's going to be a lot of other bird calls in here, but this is going to be the most prominent call we'll hear. So this is one of the first birds I hear in the summer outside of my house, believe it or not. It goes house sparrow, robin, cardinal, chimney swift. Right? Before I see a chimney swift, I can hear it. And if you get to know the call, you're going to hear it a lot more. You're going to be driving through any town in Michigan, you're going to roll down your window in the summer and you're going to hear this bird. And I bet even if you pay attention to TV shows that take place in older cities, you're going to start to hear this call. I was watching The Wire and I heard chimney swifts. So just saying. All right, I'm going to take us off the slides. We look at a video of them in flight. Hopefully this goes well. It's a very short video. There's no sound to it, or very little sound to it. So there's 3 swifts flying here. Rapid, stiff wing beats. You can see that cigar shape in flight, right? Oh, geez, how terrible. All right, let's try this. All right, I'll have to reopen the slide deck. I knew something bad was going to happen. Okay. Three swifts in flight here. Rapid wing beats, very stiff. And as it turns, you'll see that very cigar shape, right? And a good characteristic to think about when you're seeing other birds in flight is a lot of birds tend to fly quite straight, right? As the crow flies. You're not saying as the swift flies because this bird is curving around a lot. They're doing a lot of circles. They're foraging while they're flying. They're not going anywhere in particular right now except to find food. So let me restart this. Okay. So again, important to understand how they look in flight and their calls. So now that we've talked about what they look like, let's talk about what they don't look like. Again, they're not swallows. We have the chimney swift on the left, barn swallow and tree swallow on the right, commonly confused with these birds. Barn swallows generally have a forked tail, and tree swallows tend to have a white belly, iridescent top. But the dead giveaway with these birds is that they perch normally, right? So if you're watching a bird and you're like, is that a swift or is that a swallow? The second you see that bird perch, you can immediately eliminate chimney swift, okay? The other thing is that these birds, the swallows, tend to forage at much lower levels. They'll be a lot closer to the ground than chimney swifts generally are. Not saying you won't see chimney swifts kind of flying low over large wetland complexes or rivers, but generally speaking, if it's very high in the sky, it's more likely to be a chimney swift versus a swallow. Another lookalike, believe it or not, are bats. I hear this a lot. People say, oh, look at those bats exiting or entering that structure there, which is understandable because they do both use structures, which I'll get into. But one thing to think about is that chimney swifts are not nocturnal, they are diurnal. So they're out flying during the day. There's a bit of overlap with chimney swifts and bats when they tend to be out, as bats are nocturnal. So it is common to go to a roosting event and see both things flying around. And in my experience, bats tend to look a lot more clunky in flight compared to chimney swifts. They're heavy bodied, they're flapping a lot more. And honestly, when you think of a bat, look at the Batman logo, all right? That's what bats kind of look like, right? Chimney swifts much more sleek and tired, not a lot of angles to their wings. Okay? All right, covered identification. What they don't look like, let's talk a little bit about diet. So these are aerial insectivores. What does that mean? It means they're eating insects on the wing, in flight. They're not going down to the ground to grab insects. The insects have to be flying. And they pretty much eat anything that's flying that'll fit in their mouth. They're probably going to eat it. So these are wasps, bees, biting flies, stoneflies, mayflies, beetles, etc. And a single swift is estimated to need 5,000 to 6,000 insects in a single day. Right? That's a lot of food that has to be consumed to power this bird that's constantly flying, right? Like a hummingbird, it has fast metabolism. They're flying a lot, lots of wing beats. They're constantly going to sugar. Chimney swifts, same deal, except with insects. Now, where are they finding all these insects? Well, in the open sky, over wetlands, over rivers, over city parks, and even over cities, right? The open sky everywhere is beginning to be more considered as habitat in need of conservation, right? Even though we don't readily perceive insects flying, 50 to 100 feet up in the air, that doesn't mean that they're not there. I have been told, as we're watching swifts, well, I don't see any insects up there. Well, you're not 50 feet up in the air, so it might be difficult from down on the ground, but they're probably up there. Okay, so they are more or less everywhere in terms of habitat types, from wetlands to forests to cities, but what's their range? So they are neotropical migrants that overwinter in South America and make their way into the eastern half of the United States in around this time. Actually, in probably a week or two, we'll start seeing our first swifts. Last year, I had my first swift in Lansing on April 27th, so we're stone's throw away from that. And I have looked on eBird, and they're close. There was a report in Washtenaw County I saw on the Rare Bird Report, but it didn't get accepted, I don't think. So I'm hoping I got my ear to the sky. So they tend to depart Michigan in October, and that's something that we are looking further into, and I'll discuss that a little bit later as well. Okay, so this is a video. It's kind of happens a little quick, but essentially we're going to see the migration through the year, and we're going to go from low relative abundance. We're going to go from low relative abundance to high relative abundance as we progress through the season. And I want you to take note of where you see those darker purple colors, which means higher relative abundance. Starting to show up. Lots of dark colors there. August, September, October, and they're gone. Okay? So that was quick. I can play it again real quick here. This is based on eBird data. Okay, so what do we notice about those darker colors? If you ignore the Appalachia areas, but the Midwest, where did we see some of those darker colors?
Around the Great Lakes.
Around the Great Lakes, sure, but a little bit more specific. Okay, yep, Detroit. So what we're looking at is they're attracted to urban areas. So we saw Detroit, we saw Cleveland, Chicago. This is a predicted probability of occurrence map of chimney swifts, and they're attracted to these urban areas. Now, sure, we said they will more or less be anywhere in terms of habitat, but we kind of know that cities are not very good for birds, generally speaking. So why is it that we have such high abundance of these birds in urban areas? Probably already know the answer, but they're not called chimney swifts for nothing, right? These birds have adapted to living in chimneys. But that wasn't always the case. So when European colonists arrived to this continent, they referred to them as American swifts, and they were using old growth trees with hollow decays and caves and crevices where those places existed. However, as land clearing kind of happened, we lost a lot of those old growth trees, but a new substitute was created with the chimney. And there were more chimneys than there were previously in terms of nesting and roosting sites. And it's estimated, or it's believed, that the chimney swift population actually grew in response to European colonization at first. And it's also believed that the first swift started nesting in chimneys in the late 1670s. And by 1700, it was pretty widespread that they were using chimneys as their nesting sites. So let's talk about how they use this chimney, or any chimney. So we'll start with migration, and it's perfect. This is such great timing because normally I'm doing this presentation at different strange times of the year, but we're on the cusp of heavy migration, so it's very exciting. So every spring and fall, these swifts are returning to Michigan, and they form these massive communal roosts in the evening, and they fly down into chimneys for the night, spend the entire night there. They've been flying around all day, and finally they're coming back home to rest, right? And they do this for a few reasons. You have safety in numbers. If you look around and there's 500, 1,000 other swifts around you, it's a pretty good chance that you're not going to be the one that gets picked off by a sharp-shinned hawk or an owl or even a herring gull, which have been reported grabbing chimney swifts. In addition, on these cool spring nights, and later the cool fall nights, there's a lot of body heat that's created when you get 500 to several thousand swifts using the same spot, all huddled pretty close to one another, right? So, again, this is only happening at dusk, right? You're not going to see large aggregations of chimney swifts going into chimneys during the middle of the day. I'm going to show a quick video here. There's going to be some clicking sound. That's me using a clicker counter. This is at a roost by my house in Lansing. Those of you who have seen this before, this might not be that exciting. If this is new to you, awesome. This is why you count by 5, the singles. The whole actually going into the chimney is pretty quick, usually. It's the buildup that takes a long time, and if you've done a roost event before, you'll know what I'm talking about. You're sitting there or standing there staring and just waiting. Please go in. I've been out here for so long. And then this part takes, a minute and a half. And there's always some stragglers. It never fails. There's 1, 2, 3. We won't wait around for them. So that was a bit quick to watch. We have this video that's in slow motion taken by our Director of Research, Max Henschel, last fall. He also brightened it up a little bit, which makes it a lot easier to see and a lot more fun. And you can see swifts going into the chimney, but you also get the idea of how it can be easy to miscount, as you'll begin to see swifts go down the side or go behind the chimney, all of which is pretty difficult to see when it's dusk. This is the only slow motion video I've ever seen of this. I don't know why anyone else hasn't done this. Okay, so that was an overview of migration. Again, this happens in the spring and the fall. Fall gets a lot of the attention, but again, it does happen in the spring. It might not happen at all the same roosts that it does in the fall, but it does happen in the spring. And again, it's going to be happening soon, very soon. So now I'd like to talk about what's less known is breeding. A lot of people don't understand the breeding habits of chimney swifts. So they begin breeding at 2 years old, and as far as we know, during the season they're monogamous. That does not mean they mate for life. Just during the season they have one mate, and the pair performs a flying V display in the sky. And this is their nest. This is a nest that has fallen from where it is, but this nest sticks to the inside of a chimney or other structures. So it's not just used for migration, it's used for nesting, okay? It sticks out from the wall about 2 to 3 inches, and it's made from sticks and saliva. Yum. And both parents help to construct the nest. And we're going to watch a video. This is an older video, so the video is a bit grainy, but we're going to watch this. And we won't watch the whole thing, but this is a chimney swift inside of a structure. It's got a stick in its mouth, and it's sitting on the nest it's trying to make. It's got to be difficult when you don't have arms doing this. It's going to take that stick and pop up a little saliva. We hear some other swifts. And in a minute, its mate's going to show up. Maybe not happy with that placement of the stick. So after that nest is constructed, they'll lay 4 to 5 white eggs in that tiny little cup. It takes 16 to 21 days to incubate the eggs, and the young are born without feathers and are blind. 14 to 19 days, though, they're hitting the road, or the skies rather. And so remember that a single swift can eat 5,000 to 6,000 insects in a single day, which means to raise the clutch, they're going to be surpassing that 12,000 insects, right? So that's a lot of fuel. It's a lot of fuel you got to have to raise some young. Okay, it's feeding time. This is the same nest, just a little further along. If you were here early, you already saw this. So best I can count, I think there's 4, maybe 5 birds in this nest. It's very tight in there. And it's going to get pretty loud here in a second. Mom's back. Food's here. So I often get calls in late summer about a noise that's coming from my chimney, and what's this about? And it's typically chimney swifts, babies. So they'll make that sound until the parent leaves, and then they're quiet for a little bit, and then this parent comes back and makes more noise. So this is a better image, a much more recent image I was able to find on Cornell Lab's website. Great photo. I've never seen a photo like this before. But one thing probably the number one thing I want folks to take away from this presentation is what I'm about to share here. So we know that swifts roost communally in the hundreds to the thousands, right? But again, that's just at dusk. That's just them going to sleep for the night, okay? Now when we watch those videos, we had a view of one nest. Now, we had a view of one nest not because the people didn't have enough cameras, but because there is only ever going to be one nest in a chimney, okay? So you could take your simple residential chimney, or you could take the largest smokestack you've ever seen. There's only ever going to be one nest during the nesting season, okay? Very important. Now, you'll see in this photo off to the side what looks to be a nest next to this nest, and that is probably last year's nest. They usually stay stuck to the wall for some period of time, often years. So it can be a little misleading if you were to look into a chimney and see several nests. You might think that they're communal nesters, but they are absolutely not communal nesters. It's very common confusion. So the other tricky part about this is that, I just talked about swifts roosting during migration. But the other thing is that we learned is that it takes 2 years for a swift to become sexually mature. So in those 2 years, those swifts during the breeding season, when they're not mature, have to find a place to roost at night as well. So oftentimes you will have a chimney that operates as both a nesting structure and also a roosting structure. To add confusion to things, mated birds will not, again, they will not let another mated pair build a nest, but they will let other birds sleep in their nest chimney at night, okay? You can spend the night, but you can't stay, all right? It's that kind of deal. Don't raise your kids here, go along. Okay, so that's number one thing. That'll be on the quiz that I send out later. All right. So, what have we learned so far? Chimney swifts look like cigars with wings. They're not swallows or bats. They are insect eating. We've essentially made them human dependent because we've cut down a lot of trees. We've built structures that they readily adapted to. They form these massive roosts during spring and fall migration, and they nest one pair per chimney. Skipped ahead, sorry about that. So chimney swifts are doing well, right? No, unfortunately not. Chimney swifts are considered a common bird in steep decline. I have a whole list of different classifications that different governmental organizations categorize them at, but I'll use one. This is from the North American Bird Conservation's State of the Birds report. They are an orange alert tipping point species in 2025, which is a bump from the yellow alert species, and it's a bump in the wrong way. So this orange alert tipping point means that they have been declining, but have seen accelerated declines in the past decade. So across their range, everything you see in red is a decline. Now there are some positives in there, but range-wide, they've seen a 2% decline per year since 1966, which if you can do the math really quickly, I cannot. It's so I have it written down somewhere, is that that's a 67% population decline since the 1960s. And that is similar to a lot of other aerial insectivores. So although they are not swallows, they are both aerial insectivores. And that line in the pink there groups them together. And you can see they're not doing well, unlike a lot of other birds at the top there. And unfortunately, it's hard to pinpoint the thing that is causing this decline. Oftentimes, it's multiple things affecting synergistically in a negative fashion to cause this decline, but we'll cover a couple here. So this is just a general graphic from the American Bird Conservancy discussing neonicotinoids and insecticides. So because these birds rely entirely on aerial insectivores, insects, the use of insecticides has had an impact on their populations. And that can be in a couple different ways. That could be the consumption of insects that are poisoned, which could lead to developmental issues, to low nesting success, behavioral issues, or it can just straight up kill all the insects, which means that there's not as much food readily available. Okay? There was a study done in a chimney, I want to say it was in North Carolina, where they mined through the guano, the bird poop in the base of a chimney that had been being used for many, many years. And they did some DNA analysis of the poop and looked at the insects, and they found a change in their diet. Prior to about the 1950s, most of the swift diet was coleopterans, which are beetles. And then in the 1950s, it changed, and that corresponds with the use of DDT. So we had a significant change, probably a change into a less nutritious group of insects. And so there's an impact right there. But there's also loss of breeding and roosting habitat happening in North America. We've relegated these birds to mostly using man-made structures, at least in the United States. But we're also removing a lot of those man-made structures. They use old smokestacks, which are great for roosting. Again, one nest. They are not being used. They're falling into disrepair and they're being torn down. But it's not just industrial sites like this, right? A lot of residential chimneys are being capped. They're having your just general gas furnace is running through them, which means the interior of your chimney is lined with metal, which is not a useful substrate for a chimney swift. Or your water heater vents out. I didn't know that was a thing until I looked at the one in my house. Apparently it's my water heater venting out of my chimney, not my furnace. So not only are we removed a lot of the natural sites, right? Even now, we as Americans have a pretty low risk tolerance when it comes to trees. I did a period of time as an arborist and studied tree risk assessment. And we have a very low risk for trees in our neighborhoods and by our houses. So it's unlikely that a tree is going to reach the size that might be required for a chimney swift to use it. And we're continuing to develop a lot of our lands, which is a big driver of biodiversity loss overall. And we are removing all these man-made structures as well. Now, I say all this, and I will also say that there have been studies done in some cities, like London, Ontario, where they determined that there were still suitable nesting sites for chimney swifts. So it's considered to be an issue, but not the biggest issue. Eventually, we will run out of chimneys, right? We're not building any new ones anytime soon. So this will probably become an increasingly larger issue. I'll also say that there was a study done in a Kansas town that looked at over 20 years, 20 to 48 chimneys were capped or demolished, and that correlated with a 45% decrease in local chimney swift population. Again, might not necessarily have been exactly tied to the capping and demolishing of the chimneys, but a little suspect. Now again, they spend part of their time in North America, right? They're spending their winters in South America, where they also have problems that are even less in our control, right? Loss of roosting habitat. A lot of places in South America, these birds are still roosting naturally. Okay? So unsustainable logging due to increasing grazing in their overwintering places is impacting them. So they're getting it on both ends, right? They're coming up here to breed, and there's fewer places to breed, or their insects are fewer, or they're being poisoned, and then they're going back to South America with fewer roosting sites. So lots of problems. So now I'm going to talk about a little bit about what Michigan Audubon is working on with chimney swifts. And it's really just a simple three-pronged approach right now. We're doing outreach, community science management, and research. The last one I'm very excited to talk about. And I'll briefly just cover these other three. So outreach, we do presentations like this one. Let's try to strike that same pose of being in that photo. So I do 2 to 3 presentations a year on chimney swifts, but in addition, we do a Swift Night Out event. So these are events during spring or fall where you go to a known roosting site, you invite the public, and you let people know what's going on. What are you doing there? And you talk about chimney swifts as much as I'm doing now, and they help you count the swifts, and people love it. Again, you start to lose people. Takes a little while for the swift to get in, but once they start going, it's silent. People are generally in awe, and that's a very powerful thing for people to see, right? So it's really hard to describe. I know we saw the video of those 150 about swifts, but when you see 1,000 swifts going into a chimney, it literally looks like they're being vacuumed into the chimney. It's pretty amazing. So a note on this one photo, this is in Spring Arbor. Southwest of Jackson. I'm with the Jackson Audubon Society. Unfortunately, I've learned that the chimney behind us is being demoed. So, like, in a couple weeks. Bad time, but we're working it out. So, those events are also good because you can invite the public, but you can also invite people from your municipality. Invite your city council people, invite your mayors, whatever. I think that's a great idea. We've yet to do that in Lansing, but I see it on the horizon. Okay, we also do community science management. So on Michigan Audubon's website, we have a Chimney Swift conservation page. And here you can see a lot of the roosts, potential roosts and nesting sites that have been submitted to Michigan Audubon. So this is a publicly accessible form. Anyone can submit this. And these are the buttons. You can normally click on these buttons. This is just a screenshot. And the map takes you to an interactive map, which I'll show in a minute. And you can submit forms based on what you're doing, whether you're at a known roost, you can submit that information. Or maybe you're just driving through a town and you see a chimney that isn't on the map. I do this a lot. I put a lot of potential chimneys on our map. I see chimneys everywhere now, in my dreams as well. So, but we also take nest sites. So this is not the whole form, but this is the idea of what the form looks like. Some answers are required. Please submit all that information truthfully. And this is the map that it feeds. So what we're looking at here, we've got orange dots. Those are the potential roosts. Green dots are nest sites. And blue dots are confirmed roost sites. So you've actively seen chimney swifts going into there. So you can see there's a lot of gaps in our knowledge, right? We have some good things in the southern lower peninsula, which makes sense. It's probably where chimney swifts are mostly occurring because of the availability of chimneys. It gets less as you get to northern Michigan. And then in the upper peninsula, we have a lot of potential sites. And if I were to zoom in on some of those areas, in Houghton and the Sioux, there's multiple potential roosts there. At this level, they all just kind of show up as one. And in Escanaba, we have a lot of confirmed nest sites. I have a very, very eager volunteer up there who documents a lot of nest sites up there. So that's very exciting. Right now, yeah, I would love to see a blue dot up in the UP. I've been dying for someone to do a roost survey in the UP, so please. And I'm even more excited at the idea of someone finding a naturally occurring nest at the UP, which I think there's a high possibility of. So each of those dots, when you zoom in, has some information behind it. So when you fill out those forms and it feeds this map, this is the pop-up that comes up. This is a subset of the information that comes up. This is from our survey at our Swift Night Out last May on the 8th. We had 1,000 swifts at a very well-known site in Lansing. It was a very cold day. It's actually the coldest day of our survey, and it had double the amount of swifts that we had all the other days. That was interesting. The other thing that you can do with this is it shows us the history of the site. So there have been 23 records of roost surveys submitted here, and you can cycle through all of those. And we want to build a good history of known roosting sites, right? Because we think that that can be good information to protect these sites in the future. Although chimney swifts are protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, that only really applies to nest sites. Roost sites are not protected. Unfortunately, we are not Canada, who's very, very good laws regarding chimney swifts. And so I envision a future where we can use this information, take it to cities and say, we can't tear this down. It's been a roost site or a nest site for the past 10 or so years. And I know that some of that has happened here. Okay, research. This is the new frontier for Michigan Audubon and chimney swifts. So last summer, our director of research, Max Henschel, came on board, and he wanted to get into using autonomous recording units, also known as ARUs. These are small devices, they're about 6 inches in size, and it's just a recording device. It doesn't record video, it's just audio. And you can run these for about 2 weeks at a time, and they're battery powered. It stores all the information on there. You pull the data off and process it at your leisure. But we didn't know, we wanted to use them for chimney swifts, but we didn't know how we wanted to use them for chimney swifts. I'm going to get into that. So for nesting purposes, I've mentioned that the only time that swifts are landing is to go to sleep at night or to tend their young or build their nest. And swifts aren't roosting during the day, but they are building their nest and tending their young during the day. So if you see a swift going into a chimney during the day, it's pretty good evidence that you have a potential nest there, that you have a nest or that they're in the process of building a nest. So how do you confirm this though? Chimneys, there's a lot of chimneys. Then you got to go out in June and July, and then you have to watch these chimneys and watch for swifts. It's a bit taxing. It takes an hour. The protocol is you have to watch the top of a chimney for an entire hour in June or July. It's very warm, speaking from experience. And you can't look away. I don't know if you've ever, I know we live in a very busy world now. It's very hard to stare at one spot, and it's very hard to stare at one spot in the sky, waiting for a bird to fly in or out. And if you turn your head for a second, it's very possible that you will miss these birds going in or out. So it's very critical you never take your eyes off the top of the chimney. So you better have sunglasses. I also recommend maybe some earbuds to be listening to a podcast. Makes the time go. And they're not often, you might hear them calling, but they're not calling when they go in or out of a chimney. So it's very easy to miss them. So the point I'm getting at here is that it's taxing to do this. It also looks very suspicious. I have been questioned. I was watching a chimney at an apartment building from my car, and I saw a person who kept opening the door and looking at me, and eventually came in a very circuitous manner to the other side of my car, which made it difficult to talk to her and also continue watching. Once I explained what I was doing, it was all good. So I don't want to do this. It's very hard, and I don't want to make other people do this. But we know from those videos that we watched during nest building, those adults are talking to each other. And we know that when the young are born, they're very loud because there's food incoming. So we know that there's sounds being made inside of the chimney during the middle of the day. And so we said, all right, we're going to put an ARU in the chimney, and if it picks up swift calls during the daytime hours, then we can say that this is evidence of chimney swift nesting. Okay, easy, so easy. But how do you get an ARU into a 50-foot tall chimney? Well, we reasoned that a lot of these chimneys, the chimney at my house has a clean out at the bottom of it, even though it's not in use, there's still a door there. So these should be no different, right? So we contacted 6 property owners in the Lansing area, and it turns out no. It turns out when chimneys get decommissioned, they close off a lot of that access at the bottom. I don't know why. I wish they would keep it open. But one property owner, Smith Flooring Greenhouse, said, I think that the clean out is closed off, but I think there's another way. And he's very excited about having swifts in his chimney. He's from Syria where they have common swifts. And so he was so elated when he moved here, bought Smith Flooring Greenhouse, and learned that he had chimney swifts in his chimney. So he's our #1 fan of our work there. So sure enough, there was no access at the bottom, but we went into what used to be the boiler room, and he said, I think that you can get in there. So this is about 14 feet up off the ground, and this is where the exhaust from the boiler used to spit out into the chimney. And he said, I think on the other side of the plywood is just the inside of the chimney. And so Max and I hatched another plan where we were going to cut a hole into the chimney, make it into a door, and hope that on the other side was the inside of the chimney. And we were going to put an ARU in there. So we cut it open, and we were mostly right. There was some brick there. We went through a couple blades on the Sawzall there, learning that. And we were concerned we weren't going to be able to stick our heads in there, but we were just big enough. Probably good that it was this size. If we had the whole square, it's possible our bodies could have fit through, which, we don't need to fall into the chimney. This is what the inside of the chimney looks like looking up. By the way, this was very exciting. We've been looking at this chimney for years, seeing swifts go in, and now we're finally seeing what the inside looks like. And it was gross, it turns out. There's a lot of bird poop in there. But I don't know if you can see here, but there's also some old nests in there, conveniently placed right by where our access point is. So this turned out to be great news for us. And we built a little platform and put the ARU on it. There is a bolt that runs through the 2x4 into the ARU. It's not just sitting there. And it also conveniently doesn't stick out into the chimney. We didn't want any swifts running into this as they came in to roost. So let's see what we found. So Max made this map. And what we're looking at here, the ARU was set to record for 2 weeks at a time, from an hour before sunrise to an hour after sunset. And it recorded all throughout the day. We set it out there in 3 different times. And Max made this map. Each line is a day. X-axis, we have the time of day. And on the y-axis, we have number of detections. Now, this isn't number of birds. There's no real way to tell that information from here, but it's number of sound detections that the ARU is picking up. So while there probably were not 750 swifts in there, we know that there was more than 1 swift in there. So what we see is an hour, it kicks on, and we've got a lot of detections, and then it drops off. So that's swifts leaving this site, which is interesting because nobody comes and checks out this chimney during the summer. So now we know that this chimney is also a summer roosting site for unpaired birds. Okay? And then at the other end of this graph, we see pretty much the same thing. So approaching sunset, so we're about at 8 o'clock. There's a spike in detections. So those are birds going back into the chimney at night, which is all great. Like I said, this is new information. We don't check this chimney during the summer, so this was news to us that it was being used as a roosting site during the summer. But the intent of this was to figure out what was going on during the day. So if we look at the middle, we have detections. We're not all on 0. There are certainly some 0 detections, right? But if it were purely 0, we just see 1 stacked line, essentially. So we have detections at multiple times of day throughout the day. So we felt that we could confidently say that at the time of this ARU setup that we had nesting chimney swifts in this chimney, which was very exciting. And as far as we know, is the first use of an ARU in this way. This year, we plan to expand upon this, and we have already 2 confirmed sites where we're going to be placing ARUs, and are waiting on our 3rd person at Smith Laurel to give us the go-ahead to do this. So we're very interested in expanding this to other chimneys. We've had other cities that we've talked to that are interested in doing this. It's just a matter of getting the ARUs. There's a backlog. This is a very popular tool right now, and there's a big back order of these. So it was hard to get more than we already had, which was 1. And so we probably won't be doing any more than the 3 that we're doing this year, but are hoping to expand it in the future. And there's all sorts of potentials for this. One, I mean, feasibly a person themselves could check like 8 chimneys a day if you really wanted to push it. But if you could get cheaper versions of ARUs, which there are, you could toss them in all of the city's chimneys in one day and leave them over there for a month or 2 and then pull them out. You'd know where all your nest sites were over the summer. So we're very interested in the applications of this. And so that's our research. Now, it's not the only thing that can be done for chimney swifts, right? All of you can be doing something for chimney swifts. And I'm going to start off hot out the gate. Uncap your chimneys, okay? If you don't have a metal lined chimney, uncap it. April through October, that's their migration and nesting season. You can have chimney swifts in your chimney. You could be helping. I'll take questions at the end, sir. You could be helping swifts during this time of year. And I know what you're thinking. You're saying, Chad, you don't look a day over 20, and you don't own a home, and you wouldn't uncap your chimney. And first I'd say thank you for that compliment. And then I would say that you're right. I don't own a home, but Michigan Audubon, I put Michigan Audubon's money where our mouth was at our Otis Farm Bird Sanctuary out in Hastings, Michigan. We have a house with a chimney on it. And I've been with Audubon for 3 years now. And I have looked at the top of this chimney, and I have not taken the cap off of it for one reason or the other. And I've been asked about it, and I kind of deflected. And then last spring, I was out there working right near the house when I heard chimney swifts, which is pretty uncommon out there. I don't have a lot of records at that sanctuary for chimney swifts, so it's always good to see them out there. And I look up, I'm looking in the sky trying to find them, and I see them swooping down at the top of this chimney and veering off in the finest seconds when they realize that they cannot enter this chimney. It's a screened cap, it's not a solid metal cap, so it looks like it could be open if you're staring at it from a distance. So that day I decided that the cap was coming off. I called a volunteer because you don't get on roofs by yourselves, everybody. And I wasn't prepared to get on a metal roof. Metal roofs are extremely slippery. And we precariously got the cap off of the roof using a broom, some car mats, and a rake. And the cap came off. And this is taken during the daytime. It's very deceiving. It was an extremely overcast day. But it's a very short video, so don't blink. You'll miss it. Swift leaving the chimney, okay? So, there we have it as a probable nesting site, high probability. And of course, though, I started to doubt myself, everything I've learned about chimney swifts. I was like, maybe there's not a nesting. I don't know. How am I going to know until I look in there? So I waited until the end of the season, late September about. That's really pushing it for nesting season. And I more safely got on the roof of the chimney using an endoscopic camera attached to my phone, which are very hard to use, I learned. But after a little finagling, was able to find a used chimney swift nest. I was getting a little worried. I was a good 14 feet down and I wasn't seeing anything. And then I start to see little splecks, little white specks of white poop along the wall, which led me to the nest. So this is very exciting for Michigan Audubon. This is the only site that we know of on one of our properties that we have nesting chimney swifts now. It opens up a wide possibilities for research that we're very excited about. So we're hoping to have swifts again in there this year. And if Max and I can get our stuff together, we'll get a camera set up as well. That's our goal, trying to get a camera set up this year to catch the whole sequence of nesting. So it's very exciting. So if you uncap it, they will come, I swear. Okay, the other thing you can do, maybe, you can build a nesting tower in your neighborhood. Now I have a question mark next to that, as you'll see. And I'll talk about that in a second. So these standalone structures, they're about 12 to 14 feet tall. They're developed in the southern United States, and they work well down there. Not so well in the upper Midwest. So it seems that the extent of their working extends up to Pennsylvania. And then for whatever reason, there are a lot of theories, but north of that, they don't really work. So in Lansing, we have a handful that were installed prior to my start at Michigan Audubon, and none of them have nests in it. We're hoping to make some modifications this year yet that we might be able to entice them, but the jury's a little out on these, right? And when I was doing this presentation, even just last year, I would present the slide and then I would throw a big red X through this, because we, along with the Wisconsin Chimney Swift working group, were saying, don't build these. You're wasting your time, you're wasting your money, they do not work. Now, I have changed that cross to a question mark, because in Wisconsin this year, after 10 years of having a tower like this up, they had a pair of swifts nest in it successfully. So what does that mean? I don't know. Is this a reaction to climate change? Is this pressure for nesting sites? We're not really sure. So there is still hope. So if you have some can-do attitude and some money to throw around and you want to experiment, you can build one of these. I don't have any plans of these with me, but they were built by the Kyles, that's their last name, two big Chimney Swift conservation people in the southern U.S. The other option, if you have a lot of money, is to build one of these towers. So this is in Manitoba, Canada, where Chimney Swifts are an edge of range species and are listed and thus protected. So anytime a chimney is going to be demolished, they have to build a new roosting site. These towers were constructed. Now, I looked at this image for a long time, and not just in one sitting, like at multiple instances, before I finally realized, because it's really hard to really get the scale of this tower up front, that there's another tower in the back attached to the building there. So did you all see that right off the gate? Yeah, okay, all right, it's just me. So it's about 30 feet tall, and this is a structure that you as a person can stand in. So it's much larger, but they have been successful. Just interestingly enough, just for nesting swifts, they still aren't great for roosting swifts. They also don't have a lot of swifts up there. So, but these are a bit too much probably for one person, and they're a bit much for probably a city to want to build. There have been estimates thrown out. The people I talked to in Canada are very tight-lipped about how much it costs. Well, for a few reasons, I think, one of which I was told was government projects tend to be excessively expensive. But it's estimated that this is about a $30,000 build. So, you have to ask the question, is that really worth it? And it's a fair question. It's a hard question, but it's a fair question. In Wisconsin, they are going to build one of these this year or next year because of a school that's being demoed. So we'll see how that works in Wisconsin, but I do think that these have potential elsewhere in the Midwest. So the last way I'm going to just mention that you can help with chimney swifts is to volunteer to monitor. So like I said, we have this great community science reporting tool that's very easy to use. You don't have to be a birder. You don't have to have eBird. You can just go to our website off your phone or your computer and submit this information to us. Winter is a great time to look for potential roosts. I like to try to get people to think about swifts all year round, even though they're not here all year round. But winter, great time to find potential roosts. Spring comes, you use those potential roosts to check if they're getting used, and then maybe you can check them for nesting sites. Again, very simple form to fill out. So also, this is our map again. So Michigan Audubon's been doing this about since 2016. We have 461 roost surveys have been submitted to these forms. 212 potential roosts are still in need of being surveyed. So imagine if we determined what the status of those potential roosts were. That would be great. And then we have 77 confirmed nest sites. That's a newer form. We didn't have that 3 years ago, but I decided that it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy to suss out if someone has a nest site based on what they're reporting. So while we're here, let's take a little zoom in and see what's going on in the Ann Arbor Ipsy area. Okay, so again, blue dots are confirmed roosts. We have a good number of confirmed roosts, and that's much to the thanks of Juliet Berger and the blitz that they do at the end of the summer and early fall. They do a 3-day roost survey blitz. I don't know if Juliet, you are taking recruits. I know that there's a lot of chimneys around, so.
Yeah, we'll have Swift nights out usually the second or third weekend in August, and it'll be on our website, on our social media.
Thank you, Juliet. A lot of this data is from her, so. And yes, she gives it all to me, so I know where a lot, even though I'm not here now, I used to live in Ann Arbor, but even though I'm not here now, I know where a lot of the sites are. So, and we'll take a look at just a few of these. So the Burns Park Elementary School, August, during their survey on the 23rd, had 1,323 swifts. Impressive number. And then same day, Miller Manor on Miller Avenue. This is West Park right next to it, where you would only be able to view it. You can't view it from the parking lot, probably.
West Park.
Okay.
But it's a better view.
Okay. So on that same day, they had 867 swifts on their count. So on that day in Ann Arbor, there were over 2,000 swifts flying around. Did you see them? You will now. The following day on East Liberty, they had 1,380 swifts. So this is Killen's, formerly Killen's. Is that close? I was looking at it this year.
Yeah, Babs Gables would be the summer.
So there's a couple chimneys there. I know that it's probably a difficult site. A lot of these older downtown buildings and cities, they still have chimneys, but they're really hard to see because they're set back from the buildings. And then on the other side of the street, you just have more buildings. So unless you can get a higher vantage point, they're generally kind of difficult to suss out which chimney they're actually going into. So these are just 3 of the many chimneys. And again, these are all in Ann Arbor. There's sites in Ipsy. And you do this for the whole county, correct? Yeah. So I know that in Milan, there's the courthouse or the library, or all in one, I'm not sure. Yep, Chelsea, there's a few sites there. So the point being is that there's swifts here, and you know of many roosts that need assistance being surveyed, but there's also going to be many more chimneys available, either for roosting. I don't know if you could say that you've got all the roosts covered. I know there's a lot on your list, but there's going to be more. In addition, there's going to be a lot of nesting sites. So just on the drive in up there, there's a lot of residences with uncapped chimneys. Those are prime nesting sites. Okay? So what the takeaway here today is that you are all anointed Chimney Swift community scientists. It's going to be happening soon. Like in a couple of weeks, we're going to be seeing Chimney Swift. So please go out to know chimneys, just to check them out, just to get the feel for it, experience it for yourself, or join Juliet's surveys in the fall. Come up to Lansing. We're having a Swift night out May 2nd through the 9th, part of World Migratory Bird Day. Do a week-long event there. So there's ample opportunity for people to get involved with swifts. Without your help, we won't know where all the swifts are, and we won't be able to protect them. So that's what I have for you today, and I can take questions until the library kicks us out. Thank you.
Be able to bring it around. use the one at Chad.
I'll grab that too.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. We're getting right.
1 second, everyone. We'll get another microphone and then we can do questions.
It's easier than running back and forth.
Right.
This is quite a production. So, I have given this presentation to an audience of 3 people before. I was nesting on a bug.
Great, okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
We, thanks to the membership of Washington Alberta Nature Alliance, were able to preserve the chimney at 415 West Washington, even though last year the whole building was demolished, except for the chimney. And so we would love everybody, it's right across from the YMCA right here downtown. We would love everybody's help in the next few weeks to see whether the Swifts are using that chimney now that the building is gone. Reports I've had in past years is they use it a lot in the spring, and they haven't been using it in the fall for their stage migration. Anyway, City Council passed an ordinance based on many people writing into City Council to preserve that chimney. So, yeah.
Other question?
So you said there's one nest per chimney. So most of the birds you have are babies every year?
Well, a stat I did not throw out was that it's estimated that about 60% of chimney swifts go unmated. But remember that is going to, I guess I can't say for certain if that is just birds that are of sexual maturity or if that includes birds that are under 2 years old. So I can't say that 60% go unmated. So yes, the majority of birds go unmated.
So do they set up nests anywhere else? Because it doesn't seem, if there's only one nest in there and all those birds are flying in.
Yeah, so one thing to think about is during migration, the birds that we're seeing don't necessarily stick around here. So they're traveling on to other sites where maybe there's more availability. They also do nest. There are abandoned farm silos they'll nest in, barns. If they can get into them, they will try to nest in them if they're kind of dark enough. So yeah, it's like I said, there have been studies that show that this is not the #1 issue for swifts, but I can't see how it's not going to continue to become a worse problem because of what we're doing with our chimneys, capping them, not building new ones, demoing other ones. So and a lot of attention gets put on roosting sites, and I don't think that there shouldn't be all the attention, but I think finding these nesting sites is extremely important, and that's the only really federal way that these birds can be protected. We can go to our cities and protect those roosting sites, but nesting sites are just not well known. And so we do need to protect those. That's when they are legally protected. You risk people who clean chimneys. Most of them say on their website, like they cannot, those birds are protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. But I also have heard stories of nests being cleaned up that are active. So it's a problem, and we need to make sure that the nest sites that exist continue to exist and that more structures are created for the future.
I just wanted to say, should I hold it? I'll let you. I do have a nest in my chimney of my house, and it's probably been there 20 or 30 years. And we discovered it because the babies are so loud. It's my family room fireplace, so we no longer use the fireplace because there's babies every spring. And there are not a lot of birds that roost in there because we go out in the backyard and walk the dog and everything. I don't think I've ever seen more than maybe 10 swifts having a party at my house, in the spring. So do some just nest and don't have a bunch of roosting people?
Yes, yep, there's definitely going to be sites that are pretty much strictly nesting sites. And so it's very probable that you just might not have a lot of birds using it. When you see your 10, if it's at the end of the season, that could essentially be that, 10 is too many, like 7, if you had a fully successful nest and you had 5 young and 2 adults, you could see like 7 flying around, and that's probably a family unit those are fresh young. And so it's probable that it's not used by a bunch of birds. That would be, my suggestion. It's great that you have had that for so long.
I had a chimney guy come and clean the chimney once, maybe 10 years ago, and he wanted to cap it, and he wanted to do things to it to get rid of them. And I said, goodbye. I like having them.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And I'll also say that some groups are starting to work with Chimney Swift companies to discuss ways, one, using Chimney Swift companies as a way to learn about where swift nests are, and to also build a list of reputable chimney sweep companies. And then also, and some people might not necessarily like this aspect of it, but convincing a chimney sweep company that there might be more money to be made for you if you just come twice a year to cap and uncap somebody's chimney. Then it's not available during the winter months, right, where you might get other animals or critters or more precipitation in there, and then take it off come spring. So I know nobody wants to pay more for services.
I've seen for 20, 30 years at the Arboretum, Riverside, 50 to 100 birds are flying around like cedar waxwings and, with around your insects, I think. And I always wondered what they are. They're a little bigger than sparrows. Any idea what they are? And I'm thinking they're nesting in the ceiling corners in the parking structure here in town.
Yeah, so
Every year for decades.
Barn swallows is very likely. Northern rough-winged swallows would nest in different spots, but they're going to be foraging in kind of those similar spots. And tree swallows will be around, again, not nesting in the parking structure, but my guess would be barn swallows, probably. So, the riverfront at the Arb is a great spot for swift swallows and all that stuff.
Earlier you said you hatched a plan for recording birds.
Mm-hmm. No pun intended.
Well, I have the pun.
Other question?
So when you were talking about sort of the difficulty of staring at one spot for an hour and not looking away, is using like a camera on a tripod and reviewing that footage later a viable survey method?
It could be. I guess it's you either have to feel comfortable with if you want to sit with the camera, you certainly could sit with the camera and do that. I don't know if it's a good use of person time, but it's possible. On that front as well, I recently have come across some, we use AI a little liberally, but I'll just use AI, a software that is mostly used for detecting bats as they leave and enter a roost. And I see there being a possibility for using that, not primarily for nesting, but for roosting opportunities. Again, you have to sit with it. There is there's a guy out west. So there's other species of swifts in North America. And there's a gentleman who has cameras on reef sites out in the west. He gets fantastic images and videos of swifts using some of those structures. So I do think it's possible, but I think for cost purposes, it's probably the ARU is the future right now.
Other questions?
Hi, I have two questions. I've learned over the years that birds feel the urge to nest, and so they come up north where there'll be more food for their young. So if swifts are unable to procreate, why do they even come up that first year?
Because they have been doing this for thousands of years. It's ingrained in them to do that. So it's maybe at some point in time. I mean, there's also swifts. There's other species of swifts that don't migrate, that stay in South America. So then, you know, the whole reason for birds migrating up here is partly for the resources, because food supply. And if they stay, there's going to be competition by staying, right? So that might not, and that's looking at an unfathomable time scale for them to probably change. So.
And so I'm also wondering, what are the complaints that you have from people if you've asked them to take off their caps on their chimney? Why are they afraid of the birds coming in?
Yeah, well, on a purely like infrastructure view, people are concerned about moisture, debris, things like that getting inside the chimney. And I will say that we have looked in the bottom of some chimneys, and there's a lot of, and it's not just like swift stuff. Like if you leave an uncapped chimney, you're getting leaves and all sorts of debris. We were just at the chimney in Lansing that we opened the clean out door and you just couldn't see anything. There's just a wall of dirt and, you know, stuff slowly decomposing over time. So there is that possibility, which also gives reason to, you know, just uncap it during the time that swifts are here, right? And then thinking about birds, people, not everybody likes birds, to be honest. And some people find birds disgusting, and people are concerned about, you know, pathogens or bird flu, which is an unlikely, chimney swifts are an unlikely vector for something like that. And to my knowledge, there have not been any diseases or pathogens that have been shown to be able to be spread from chimney swifts to people. But, you know, if this is a chimney that you actively use, like for fires or whatever, you should be getting it regularly cleaned anyways. And so if you're doing that, you would be keeping it clean and free of those possibilities. And also, people don't like the noise that the young make. I try to tell people it's only going to last a couple of weeks, because by the time they're making sounds, they're probably already at least a week old. So you've only got 2 more weeks to suffer. And it's not like it's constant, you know. And so if you can survive those 2 weeks, go outside. It's summer, you know. Don't be inside. Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you, Chad.